Magnus Carlsen has been chess' undisputed greatest player since he was first crowned world champion in 2013. Being one of the game's greatest prodigies certainly comes with no shortage of accolades and praise, which is why in this video we're going to be proving that even gods can bleed and go over some of the biggest blunders in Magnus Carlsen's decorated career. Let's head to the 2022 World Rapid Tournament, where Magnus Carlsen is challenging Vladislav Artemiev. Vladislav opens with pawn to d4, and Magnus responds by playing knight to f6, otherwise known as the Indian game, an extremely common opening that he's played many times before. Maybe the fact he's so comfortable on this opening is part of the reason he plays such a game-ending blunder in the upcoming moves. A few more moves are played, and the world champion decides to get aggressive, bringing his dark squared bishop out to b4. Checking Artemiev's king, he blocks with a bishop of his own, and Magnus makes the choice to trade pieces early on. Magnus castles his king, and after thinking for a few seconds, Vladislav castles also. Magnus captures on d4 with his knight, looking to trade pieces. Although little did anyone know, this was the beginning of the end for the world champion. White recaptures with a queen, and Magnus brings both of his rooks into the game, attacking Vladislav's queen on c4, forcing it to retreat. Magnus brings his light-squared bishop out and instantly opts to trade pieces in an attempt to bring himself closer to an endgame. Typically, Magnus is unbeatable when it comes to endgame situations. However, unfortunately in this game, he wouldn't even get a chance to make it there. Carlsen begins launching an attack on the right side of the board by moving his pieces up, and Vladislav attempts to bring his rook into the game by moving it forward. This, however, instantly gives Magnus the opportunity to trade rooks on d1, and he takes it straight away. As the remaining pieces are whittled down, Carlsen can almost taste victory. However, he isn't aware of the tragic disaster that's about to unfold. Vladislav moves his rook to d1, and Magnus responds by playing knight to e4, a huge mistake. Magnus tries his best to keep a straight face in the hopes that his opponent won't realize he just lost the game for himself. The tension has never been higher, and if we watch Vladislav's face closely, you can actually see the moment he realizes what's happened. Magnus is forced into a terrible trade where he loses a whole piece, and he is not happy about his choices. After a few more shuffling pieces, Vladislav finds the win fairly easily and defeats the world champion. However, this is nothing compared to when Magnus lost in only 8 moves to a 2900 rated player, arguably his most destructive loss to date, and you will see why shortly. This is a bullet game, meaning both players only have a minute on their clocks to play an entire game. The stakes have never been higher. Magnus responds to the e4 opening with c6, which gets met with d4. The opening that Carlsen is playing is known as the Karo defense, a fairly common opening that you might know if you're a Gotham chess viewer. The world champion is looking extremely confident to start this game off, pre-moving most of his moves. However, little did he know this would actually be his downfall, because the main lines of the Karo are fairly well known, and this is a 1-minute game. Ideally, most moves would be pre-moved. Carlsen's opponent, however, takes advantage of this and decides to go for a sneaky checkmate on h7, barricading the square with his bishop and queen. Before Magnus has time to cancel his pre-moves, the fatal blow is delivered, and Magnus's shirt suffers the consequences. At least Magnus Carlsen invented a new line in the Karo defense, the Shirt Gambit. In this next game, Magnus plays the biggest blunder of his whole career, where he actually loses a game by breaking the rules of chess. Magnus on the white pieces opens with e4, to which his opponent responds to with c5, commonly known as the Sicilian defense. He then plays his pawn to d4, and the first trade of the game is made, with white's knight recapturing the center. Both players spend some time developing their pieces, and this is where the game really begins. Magnus brings his queen forward to d2, and his opponent responds with knight to f6, which is a less than ideal move. Had Magnus not blundered this game, it should have been an easy win for the world champion. Both players trade pieces, leaving Carlsen with extremely nice control of the center of the board. As this is a blitz game, the time remaining on both clocks is extremely short, which could be part of the reason Magnus makes such an unfortunate mistake, as you'll see shortly. Carlsen captures on b4 with his knight, and Savchenko responds by recapturing with his pawn. Magnus captures again with his rook, and now has a sizable piece advantage as we get closer to the endgame. Savchenko begins to launch an attack on the left side of the board with his queen and rook, and Magnus responds by bringing his own rook over to defend. Savchenko captures on d3 with his dark squared bishop, and Magnus recaptures with his queen, following up on that with a queen trade on a3. A few more pieces are shuffled around, and both players are now left with mere seconds on their clock. Magnus plays rook to d3, checking Savchenko's king. The black rook comes back to block the attack, and Magnus opts to trade pieces once again. However, this is where the disaster unfolds for the world champion. In the heat of the endgame, Magnus moves his king to d4, when he actually meant to move it to c4. Both moves are completely legal, although because he took his hands off the piece for a split second before correcting himself, this can technically be seen as a double move. His opponent chooses to call him out for it, and unfortunately for Carlsen, he is forced to resign.